fearless and driven by truth. Broadcasting live from beautiful British Columbia, it's RoadKill Radio.
Hi everyone, I'm Kari Simpson, and this is RoadKill Radio News. Joining me in studio tonight is
Ron Gray.
And we have a big show for you tonight. Joining us online is Ezra Levant from Sun News Network. He hosts the great show called The Source. Mr. Ezra Levant.
I'm Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say I offer good nutrition in a simple way. When you eat the Chiquita, you've done your part to give every single day a healthy start.
Hi,
thanks for having me on the show again. It's great to be back.
Now, Ezra, not only are you the host of The Source on an ever-growing popular news network, of course, Sun News.
You're also the source of a host of controversy.
Well, you just can't help yourself, can you?
You know what? I think there's something broken in my personality. And when normal people are conflict averse, I am conflict oriented. I'm a trouble seeker or a troublemaker, where normal people, like to live regular lives.
One of the good troublemakers.
Well, I think it just finds you. I don't even sure you go looking for it. But anyway, Ezra Levant, you have a long history here on RoadKill Radio. You are one of our favorite individuals in all of Canada because you do those important things like you actively participate in our democracy. You speak truth without fear, which is an interesting challenge in this country, growing more and more challenging every day, it seems. Now, tell us about this latest controversy. Why can't I walk into a grocery store and see Chiquita bananas without laughing?
Well, that's been a fight I've had for a little while. As you may know, I wrote a book called Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands.
Yeah.
And basically I'm making the argument that if you don't want to buy oil from the oil sands, that's fine. But just please tell me where you're going to get it from instead, because the alternative is not some science fiction fantasy fuel of the future like the lithium crystals from Star Trek. So until we invent that perfect fuel of the future, if you're not getting oil from Canada, you're probably buying it from OPEC. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Nigeria, Venezuela, Sudan, bad countries like that. So I compare the two oils. I call one of them ethical oil, made in Canada, in an environmentally responsible, peaceful way that treats workers and minorities with respect, versus conflict oil that funds regimes like Saudi Arabia's tyranny. Anyways, so I've been on this pro-oil sands kick for about a year and a half, but an anti-oil sands lobby group managed to convince a U.S. company called Chiquita Banana to boycott oil sands oil. They put out a press release saying, for ethical reasons, we're declaring a trade war against oil sands oil. We're asking all our banana trucks not to use Canadian oil. Now, that's a little bit chutzpah to begin with, because, as you may know, the Chiquita Banana Company historically was called the United Fruit Company, and they were very poorly behaved in Latin America, undermining democracy. That's where the phrase banana republic actually comes from that company. And even as recently as 5 years ago, they were fined $25 million for supporting a terrorist group in Colombia. So these are bad dudes. So I went on TV and I took them on, and I ended with a little flourish. I said, "Hey, Chiquita Banana," and I referred to the vice president. I said, "Chinga tu madre," which is a rough insult in Spanish that I know would hit home with Chiquita. Anyways, a grand total of 6 Canadians asked for an investigation into my comments, and these were not normal viewers or normal Canadians. These are political activists. I mean, the ringleader is named David Klimenhaga. He's a union boss from Alberta. They're against my show, not because swearing, even in Spanish, is illegal. It's not. There's swears on TV every day in Canada. It's not against the rules. It's because they don't like my politics. They don't like the oil sands. They don't like that I'm a conservative. So they complain to something called the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, which are the TV and radio censors. It's hard to believe that in the 21st century that still exists. I mean, we don't have newspaper censors. We don't have internet censors, but TV and radio has this group of censors, and trouble is, we're required by law to be a member of the Censors Council.
Okay.
Our TV license with the CRTC says we have to join. So they issued a ruling in June saying that my show was illegal. I illegally broke their rules of TV by saying "chinga tu madre," and that I should never ever do it again. I better watch myself.
So you were a naughty boy, Ezra Levant.
That is true, and I hear that a lot from friends and family. And it's people's right to believe that, and they can switch the channel or debate me or ignore me. Like, there's a lot of things you can do if you see someone on TV you don't agree with. I think flipping the channel is what
Okay.
don't have to have a lawyer.
Let's stop right there, because this has been the fascinating part, and something you always seem to gift to me and so many Canadians, Ezra, is you cause us to become enlightened and educated about things that we had no idea about. Now, and I appreciate that you do play a good role here in Canada as a result of that. So, Sun News Network, you're the host on a really popular show, one that we appreciate here at RoadKill Radio. You are involved with this maverick group of true news journalists that you bring truth and stories that we're just not seeing on the lamestream media. So you host a show called The Source. You've got a group of peers there, a high caliber, popular group. Everybody's happy that this exists because we're finally getting information that we didn't otherwise get here in Canada on television. So this 6 individuals decide to take advantage of a regulatory body. Now, this isn't even a regulatory body. You must belong to this association. Sun News Network is required to belong to the Canadian Broadcast Standard Council.
That's the thing. It's the worst of all worlds. Like, if it was a government court, it would at least have some basic rules of fairness. You would have the right to appeal it. It's called judicial review. But it's not. It's actually a private group of folks, but you're required by law to be a member of it. So you're forced to join a voluntary group. But because it's outsourced censorship, they don't have the rules of a normal court. I don't have the right to appeal. I don't have the right to have a lawyer there. I don't have the right to attend the hearing. I don't have the right to face my accusers. I mean, it makes the Human Rights Commissions look positively fair. So the trouble is, if we don't submit to these censors, we could lose our TV license. And so historically, if you lose a case like I did, TV and radio owners are so panicky because their licenses are worth tens of millions of dollars to them.
Yes.
They almost always immediately fire the person who's been censored. I mean, that's how Howard Stern got kicked off the radio, Rush Limbaugh kicked out, Dr. Laura was kicked out, Dr. Charles McVitie was kicked out. You'll notice that there's a strain here that they're all libertarian or conservative. No left of center person has ever kicked off the radio. Oh, and by the way...
Because they never offend anybody, Ezra. Didn't you know that?
Either conservatives don't bother complaining because we're not censorious by nature, or this broadcast interest council say, oh, no, they didn't really mean it. Let me give you an example. There was an extremist Muslim who had a show called Dil Dil Pakistan. I know it's one of your favorites. Anyways, Dil Dil Pakistan talked about basically hating Jews. Jews are evil. Get the Jews. Jews. I mean, not my cup of tea, me being a Jew, but I probably wasn't watching Dil Dil Pakistan anyways. But someone was, and they complained to the Broadcast Standards Council, and the Broadcast Standards Council said that was fine. You can say death to the Jews, hate the Jews, be anti-Semitic, as long as your tone of voice isn't too hysterical. I'm not even making that up. You can check it yourself at the Broadcast Standards Council's website. So my point is that there's an anti-conservative, anti-Christian bias.
Well, wait though, Ezra.
I mean, that's the same with Human Rights Commissions. But instead of backing down, my bosses here at the Sun said, you know what, Ezra? We believe in free speech and we back you all the way. Don't you go quietly. So they've actually done something I've never seen in Canada before, which is stand up. It's easy for me to stand up on my own. But Quebecor, which owns the Sun News Network, is a very big company that's regulated a lot by the government. Remember, they don't just have a TV station. They have a cable company. They have a cell phone company. So they're very, very much under the gun of the government all the time. So it's remarkable to me that a multi-billion-dollar company like Quebecor would stand by me 100% on this free speech fight. I'm very proud to tell you that.
Okay, but Ezra, I want to just make sure on one point here, because are you sure just the pitch and tone of how you said the words wasn't the problem here?
Oh, listen, these guys are making it up as they go. Like I said, it's not a real court. They don't have real jurisprudence. These aren't lawyers. I mean, actually, the people on the panel, there were 4 people on the panel. 3 of them were my direct competitors. Like, one of them was Troy Reeb, who is the head of news at Global. I mean, he's a direct competitor.
And they didn't recuse themselves from any of this.
No, and you know, 2 of them, one of them was from CTV, and I mean, that's the thing. It's sort of this private club that, and I'm not blaming these guys in particular, Troy Reeb or the others who were on it, because it's the system we're all forced into by the government. I mean, if the government didn't force us to be a member of this club, we'd have left it a long time ago. So it's not that I'm actually blaming the individual kangaroo court judges here. I mean, they're actually not the source of the problem. They're the face of the problem, but the root of it is the government itself, which has this archaic, obsolete censorship law on the books. And
Okay, so let's talk about the fight now, because obviously Quebecor, who owns Sun News Network, is standing behind you. Bravo to them. There's another problem here, and it's called the CRTC, is it not? Now, where has this complaint gone? What's the latest on this?
Well, and that's the thing. The Broadcast Standards Council, when I wasn't fired, well, they sort of freaked out about it, because normally people who are condemned by the Broadcast Standards Council are gagged or even fired, as I mentioned. Dr. Laura, gone. Rush Limbaugh, gone. Charles McVitie, gone. But not me. So they sent a very nasty letter to my bosses saying, you better shut Ezra up, you better put him on a short lease. And they actually demanded that the Sun provide in writing a written plan to control me in advance. Like, that's what lawyers call prior restraint, which is, you haven't said anything wrong yet, but we're so sure you're going to. We want to censor you in advance. That's so un-Canadian to, I mean, if someone says or does something and you've got to beef with them after the fact, that's one thing. But to basically arrest someone in advance for a pre-crime, that's the stuff of science fiction. That's the stuff of totalitarian Russia. It is so un-Canadian that this Broadcast Censors Council wrote to my bosses and said, you need to give us a written plan by which you're going to shut Ezra up. You know what? Go to hell. I've got freedom of speech, and I don't need a bunch of kangaroo court wannabe judges telling me that I can or can't have a certain political opinion. And I'm sorry, speaking back forcefully to an unethical American company that just paid a $25 million fine for propping up terrorists, I am allowed in a free country as a free man to look those guys in the eye and say, hey, you know what? Chinga tu madre.
Ezra, you used a phrase earlier on that I think needs to be repeated and enlarged upon. You talked about outsourced censorship, and we see, this thing that the government hands off the control of broadcasting to the CRTC, but the CRTC then hands off the business of censoring people that it doesn't like to the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the thing. It's a way for politicians to get off the hook for these outrageous rulings. So let me give you an example. Last year, the Broadcast Standards Council decided to ban the song Money for Nothing by the band Dire Straits. 25 years ago, that song hit #1 in Canada. It has probably been heard millions of times in this country by millions of people. It's a great song. It was listed, I think, by Billboard as one of the top 100 rock songs of all time. I mean, but 25 years after that song went gold in Canada, four losers meet in secret and say, you know what, they use the word fag in that song, so let's ban it forever. Well, by the way, it's an anti-homophobia song that Elton John himself sings, but the idiots at the Broadcast Standards Council lacked any nuance or understanding. So 25 years after the song, I mean, it would be like saying that Elvis Presley, he swings his hips too much, we gotta ban that. Yeah, you're about 50 years too late. My point is, if people don't like the song Money for Nothing, they can turn the channel. Frankly, I turn the channel because I've heard the song too much. And, I'm overdosed with that song. But to order every radio station in the country not to, that's the kind of idiots they are. And you can understand why the government would want to outsource this, because can you imagine being a politician who gets blamed for being so stupid? I mean, for having such a lack of a sense of humor, for being so censorious and unartistic and such a white blanket and a party pooper that you want to ban a song. Like, what kind of loser wants to ban a song? And what kind of idiot thinks you can do that in the age of the internet? And
but they did it.
They texting. I mean, do you really think you can ban a song in the year 2012? Well, last year these morons tried it, and they are obsolete. And again, if I'm sounding rough in my language, I shouldn't particularly pick on the individuals tasked with enforcing this. I'm trying to take on the system. I'm saying, look, let's just scrap this. It's like one of those archaic laws, like you're not allowed to walk down the street with an ice cream cone in your pocket. Every town or city has a dumb old law that the police don't enforce. Well, this dumb old law is being enforced. Let's just get it off the law books.
Okay, Ezra, I want to talk about what needs to be done now. Now, the Canadian Broadcast Standard Council, is it taxpayer funded?
No, it's funded by the broadcasters themselves. But like I say, we are required in paragraph 6 of our TV license to be part of it. So that's what's even more perverse. And Troy Reeb, when he came, I invited him on my show. This is one of my censors, and he said, he said, Ezra, the Sun is part of this. The Sun is paying for it. The Sun is rivals at Global News. But those aren't the only two choices in the world. Either they censor me or they censor me. No, how about we realize that we're adults and I'm allowed my political opinions even if they are offensive? And how about nobody censors me? How about there's a third choice here instead of, well, Ezra, if I don't beat you up, they will, and I tell you, I'll be more gentle when I punch you.
Okay.
No.
What's the solution, Ezra?
Well, the solution is to trust Canadians to be grown-ups, and if they, it's called freedom. You can look it up in Section 2B of our Charter of Rights, or in Section 1 of the Bill of Rights that Diefenbaker brought in there. You can look back to basically 8 centuries since the Magna Carta, where we as a free people are allowed to say things, and it's not even just my right to say it. More importantly, it's the right of my viewers to hear it. Like, I'm just one guy, and I have rights too, but my thousands of viewers, don't they have a right to choose what they do or don't want to hear?
Absolutely. But so how do we get rid of this requirement then when it comes to licensing of our news and views? Because every Canadian has a stake in this as far as I'm concerned, because if the CRTC requires this association, your affiliation for one thing, just to be able to do business in Canada, and then it censors viewpoints or words, I want the right for you to say something and me not to like it, Ezra.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, with freedom of speech, I like to say it's the one gift we have to give to our opponents if we're going to enjoy it ourselves. I mean, you can't only stand up for the thoughts you believe in, and that's difficult sometimes. For example, I'm Jewish, and that means if someone is anti-Semitic or a Holocaust denier, I have to, I don't bite my tongue. In fact, the opposite. I go into debate mode, refute mode, argue mode, but I don't push that button called duct tape his mouth shut. Yeah. I don't call the cops. I don't dial 911. That's tough. It's tough to listen to something you hate and accept that it can be said. Now, you don't have to accept it in silence. We have a right to be offended. We have a right to turn a channel. We have the right to rebut, to debate, to write a letter to the editor, call a talk show, to run for office, to campaign to change the world. We have 100 things we can do if we don't like something.
Okay, but isn't that the problem, though, Ezra? For once, the sort of what I view as the civil, moral Canadians that are sensible, the ones that put up with all the nonsense from the left because the more they talk, the more we laugh kind of thing. Isn't that the problem with Sun News Network? Isn't that the problem that you, Ezra Levant, as the source of a problem, because you dare speak out now? And aren't we seeing more and more of this because Canadians on the civil society are no longer remaining silent? We're saying, wait a minute, we don't like where this country is going. We don't like the hijacking of our courts. We don't like the hijacking of our corporations that do a good job and give millions and millions of people jobs as a result of capitalism. Isn't that the problem, is that the voices now are speaking out, they're organized, they've created news networks like Sun News Network, and all of a sudden we see a whole bunch of hissy fits on the left?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is because, like I said in the past, if there was a conservative voice that irritated people, it would be shut up pretty quickly. But now, with the advent of citizen media, internet, podcasts, YouTube, satellite radio even, satellite TV, you cannot shut people down as easily. And so, all of a sudden, dissident voices, some of which are conservative, some of which are radical in every way, can't be shut up. And so the left, which is used to just railroading its opponents out of town, they have to engage, and they don't like it, which is why they always call for censorship and why they always call for what they call the fairness doctrine. Every time you have a show, you have to have a liberal on, not just a conservative. They're trying to shut up or rebalance things. They're trying to get back to their imbalance that they had before. Let's state the obvious. I mean, Canada, for 3-4 elections in a row, has voted conservative, not a majority, but that's the most popular party. So during elections, we have sort of a test. Do people support the Jack Layton view? Do people support the Stéphane Dion view? And every election time, the political class is rebuked, but the media party has not really been rebuked. They keep trucking away. The media party, which is even more out of touch than politicians, because every 4 years, politicians have their moment of truth. But the media really never has its moment of truth, because there is no vote there. I guess you could vote by taking your newspaper 50 cents elsewhere, and we see that newspapers are closing. Maybe
that is happening.
Political correctness is part of that.
Ezra, let me pick up on Kari's earlier question, because here am I, just an ordinary dumb Canadian sitting out in Langley, BC, who does not want to see the would-be censors closed down Sun News Network. What do I do? What do I do as an ordinary citizen from Langley?
Well, I think there is one thing we can do, and that is Section, I think it's 5 of the broadcast regulations, which are promulgated by the Canadian Cabinet. They actually start this whole mess to begin with, because Section 5 of the broadcast regulations require TV stations to be censored for hurt feelings, for very vague things like what they call profane or abusive pictorial representations. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, that would put any editorial cartoonist out of business if it were applied to newspapers. So there's these super vague, politically correct, don't hurt feelings regulations in the law that then empower the CRTC and the Broadcast Standards Council to act. So if we were to remove Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations, then this whole house of cards would come down, because then we could leave the Broadcast Standards Council and they couldn't do anything to us. Then we wouldn't have to have this section in our TV license that requires us to be in there, because it all comes from that government regulation in the first place. So that change doesn't even need to be changed in Parliament. That can be done with the stroke of a pen in an order in council by the Cabinet. So it's actually easy to fix, but I would put it to you that 99.9% of Canadians don't know about it. I bet even 99% of parliamentarians don't know that law is on the books and could be changed with the stroke of a pen.
Okay, so we need to write to our Member of Parliament and remind them that Section 5 of the broadcast regulations can be changed by order in council, and it should be changed. By the way, I got to say, Ezra, when you start talking about cartoons that hurt people's feelings, it reminds me of a piece of your history. If print journalism had the same regulations as broadcast journalism, you would have been before the Print Standards Council.
That's right, and of course that was the Human Rights Commission of Alberta, which continues to this day to be in its
still
body. And I was prosecuted for 900 days for daring to run a news story illustrating the riots overseas that had as their purported cause the Danish cartoons of Mohammed. So the fact that I, as a news publisher, for merely showing the news, not even opinions that were offensive, but that the news offended someone's feelings, I was put through a 900-day ringer with 15 different government bureaucrats and lawyers on the file. I think that's disgraceful. And for Alberta, whose provincial motto is strong and free, I think it's a double disgrace. And the fact that that still exists on the law books is even worse. And I say again that in the entire history of Canadian Human Rights Commissions, never has a extremist Muslim, an extremist Sikh, an extremist Tamil, for example, been prosecuted for their opinions. But Christians and conservatives are the meat upon which these human rights commissions feast year after year. They're bigoted, they're biased, they're lopsided, and 90% of the time the victims of these commissions just plead guilty because they know they're not going to win and they don't have the money to fight.
Well, the fact that you took a camera into that inquisition and put the results on the internet, as you say, this is the people's medium, and that was a brilliant stroke, and it really illuminated something. But we still haven't got rid of the Alberta human rights.
Well, and there's so much work to be done on this, Ezra, and we fast run out of time here. Ezra, we will keep on this story. And again, thank Quebecor for their strong stand on this, standing behind you, because when they have stood behind you on this, I think they stand behind all of us Canadians that want the freedom and liberty and the opportunity to express our opinions without fear publicly. That's our rights, and we should be able to enjoy those rights. Ezra Levant, host of The Source on the Sun News Network, thank you so much for not only your time, Ezra, but your dedication on behalf of all the Canadians who will never know how much they should be appreciating you.
Well, you're very kind. Thanks for having me.
And we'll do it again, Ezra. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. I got to say, my letter to Mark Laura will be off this afternoon.
Well, and you know what else, Ron? I think we also have to talk to people about expressing their thanks for Quebecor. And you know what, people? Again, this is that same formula that we want civil, moral Canadians to adopt. This has to become just like breathing, so automatic. support the news groups that are doing your work for you. Sun News Network does a fantastic job. Michael Coren, Brian Lilly, they have a whole great gang of people there who are mavericks. There's no other word for it. They speak truth. Ezra Levant probably heads up the pack, or at least gets into the most trouble. But, send off a letter expressing your appreciation to Quebec Core 2. I'm sure we'll publish the address in conjunction with this published webcast. And, I really want to end this by saying one thing. Ezra is brilliantly articulate. He is so steadfast in what he says and does. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but by golly, at least you know where he's coming from and you know his position on things. And that is a healthy kind of individual to have in our public arena, Ron, because you know his position and he will defend it. And I know Ezra can be reasonable, and if he's wrong, I think he'd be man enough to suggest that he got it wrong. That is healthy debate. That is a good formula for a strong nation. The ability to express opinions and to debate openly with fervor, enthusiasm and passion. That is lacking on so many of these debates because they shut down the debate, whether it's on abortion, whether it's on issues involving homosexuality, parental rights. I think it's time we grew up, Canada, and that we start supporting news networks and other media that actually bring the debate out into public.
I think we also need to say this. I personally would not have used the phrase online that he used. But I will defend to the death his right. Look, he was really justifiably angry at a corporation with a bad record that was distorting the public dialogue, and he was telling them, shut up.
Yeah.
But he wasn't saying, bring the government in and make them shut up. He's arguing with them.
Yeah, bring it on if you got something to say back to me.
Let's talk back and forth.
Yeah.
And I will defend his right.
And anybody else's.
Respond that strongly. Yeah.
And anybody else's. Time went way too fast, Ron.
Kari, it's been good. This has been RoadKill Radio. Good night.
We'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.
You've been listening to RoadKill Radio. Join us again next week for another trip down the superhighway of information, fact, and truth.